own your creative journey, and, you are the creative director of your own career.
Julia, welcome to the show. Really happy to have you in the podcast.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, I love what you're trying to do right now, the book that you're writing, and like what it will mean for creatives. And we're definitely going to talk about this. But if you want to start with letting people know who you are, what you do.
Sure. I'm a creative director. I work for an e-commerce brand here in the United States. I'm Australian, but I've been in the States for nearly 20 years. And, I've worked in a number of different creative fields, but now sort of swept back into sort of the marketing and design side of retail. So it's been a bit of a wild journey, but I'm now very comfortable, very happy in where I am in my career, but excited about other projects that I'm working on.
And I know you're doing this for like more than 20 years. So did you start when you moved to the States? Was it at the same time?
It's nearly 30 years, actually, Chris, to age myself there. No, so I started in Australia. I started out as an art director in advertising in Australia, and went to RMIT in Melbourne, and it started out as an old school art director where you drew everything, and really didn't start getting into computers until I was in my mid-20s. So it's been like in the transition in my career space has been extraordinary in terms of how we do things as creative people. So then I had a dream of living and working in New York City, and I had two friends in the industry here, and I came for the first time in 2002, and I really it got under my skin, New York City, and I thought, I've got to come back here. I really think I could live here, and, made the journey.
Amazing. And so basically this means that you went like through all the phases of like design. I think the last 20 to 30 years, it changed so much, and you went through all of them almost.
Yeah. I mean, really, it has been wild to see how different things are, even in a 5-year span. There was no real AI 5 years ago that anyone was sort of looking at. So it's just been, and that's why I've kept in this business, because it's constant growth and learning and change and development, and you got to hold on for the ride.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And why did you pick New York?
I had lived in Europe for a short time in my 20s, and I love Europe. I that's certainly in my heart as well. But I felt something in New York which felt very different. There's a freedom there. There's a generosity there that I wasn't actually expecting, and it's beautiful. It's a center, and it's got a lot of incredible cultural things there that it's hard to compare, really. But I think it just really got under my skin, and I couldn't shake it.
Okay, awesome. I have never visited New York yet, so I definitely want to. And I always thought that I can live there, so definitely need to visit at some point.
Yeah, I mean, it is an amazing city. It's a beautiful place. And what surprised me is like it is small sort of villages. It's not like this, people have this perception like this monumental thing, which it is. But really, when you're living there, you're living in a 5-block radius. That's what everyone talks about. Oh, we don't walk further than, 5 blocks to go to dinner or whatever. But so you do get to feel a sense of community there, which was really eye-opening and wonderful.
Okay. I never thought about it this way. That's very interesting, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why, people love their neighborhoods, and they get very particular about what neighborhood they're living in. So you'll hear people talking about, specific areas in Brooklyn or Manhattan or wherever.
So I always start the podcast with the first question is always, what's your goal and how far away you think you're from getting there? So I will ask you the same question. What's your goal right now?
So my goal right now is a growth pattern. It's actually a continuing goal. But really what I'm focusing on now is helping people more in the design field. And that's perhaps why I decided to write this book, one of the reasons why I decided to write the book. But also in my own role as a creative director, really finding more ways to motivate, to elevate the creative process, to help designers advocate for themselves and really help them, find their voice. Because I think as a young designer, I was flailing around for a long time and didn't necessarily have that confidence. And I think that, so in a nutshell, my goal is really to help in the design field, through creativity, because I think that designers have a lot to give the world, essentially.
That's amazing. That's a very nice goal to have. And I think it says a lot about you. Like your main goal is to help others. So that's amazing.
Yeah. And I think it's taken a while for me to figure that out. It's like, it took me a while to feel confident enough to feel like I could help people, because I think that certain times in your career, you feel like you don't know enough, or you don't have enough experience or what have you. And I think now, getting older, I can sort of say, I think I've got enough experience now to talk about this,
Mm. Yeah. I see what you're saying. And definitely, I, for example, I have friends that I will tell them you could be a very good mentor, and you should try that. And the answer always is, no, I don't have enough experience to do that. And we always, I think, see ourselves this way because we always want to grow more, I guess. We always have that feeling of, yeah.
And I feel like even at different points of your career, even if you're just starting out on your journey, more than, someone who's just, still in high school or what have you. And I think we can all, be mentors in one way or another. And that's the great community of creative people. I think there is a generosity there. And I just advocate for more of it, because I think it can be a very individual and sort of solo pursuit, but you do need to still find your people. You need a little support posse to be there.
That's very important. And I think it's the one thing that I kept from going to graphic design school. Like, I feel like in the creative industry, you don't really need the paperwork or the diplomas, whatever, but the people that I met there was the one thing I kept. So, yeah.
Yes, for sure. And it's sort of, there's a positive reinforcement when you're around other creative people. It's like, oh, we're all sort of in the same place. And, the sum of all of that can be really uplifting.
So you're writing the book right now. So that's the main goal. From 0 to 10, 10 is finishing the book, publishing it, people can buy it. Right. Where are you right now from 0 to 10?
I think I'm probably at about 4 or 5. I'm deep in the research. And I have had I work with an editor and have been speaking with an agent as well, but there's a lot of work still to do. And frankly, I said to my editor the other day, I was like, I could just keep researching. It's so fun speaking to creatives. But obviously I want to get the book out there as well. So I would say I'm hoping within the next 12 months, it's in a hard copy.
Awesome. And the book, it's called The Creative Career Blueprint. And
yes, basically that's the working title,
Yeah. Maybe this gonna change until you publish it. But the main idea, it's exactly this, like a blueprint for creative people to follow like a career. And I need to tell people that this is not just you writing a book. You're actually interviewing a lot of creative people, and you're getting insights in there from top designers, Oscar winners. You have best-selling authors, photographers. I think you have so many creative people in there. Yes. So first of all, it's an honor that you also interview me, because this is how we met, and I'm honored to be a small part on this book. But yeah, I need to tell people that it's not just you writing a book. It's so many insights, so many creative people in there that's super interesting for me.
Yeah, and it's super interesting for me. That's, part of the reason I'm writing it. And, I've had creative people around me my whole life. I'm lucky enough to have a family of very creative people. And I've always been fascinated by other people's processes and how they get to where they're going. And so I've roped in a lot of people, and filmmakers and writers and illustrators, photographers, it's on and on. And because I wanted to have a whole spectrum of different types of creative fields, because I think we are all interconnected. And what I found fascinating is how many sort of similar traits or rituals or habits from the creatives there are. It's really extraordinary. And, I think there's a lot to gain from hearing other people's experience, particularly when, as I said, you can often feel quite isolated, and hearing about other people's journeys and how how they've gotten through challenges and what have you, I think is really, just, it's a good learning, and it can, it's reassuring. It's like, oh, someone else went through this,
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Definitely. I think, most of us going through the same issues, the same difficulties as creatives. And we always think that we are alone. And then when you hear someone else is going through the same thing, it's very helpful. And actually, the thing that you mentioned was my next question. If you found something that it's similar to most of the creatives, no matter what industries they are in.
Well, I think one of the touch points that I've researched quite a lot in the book is around this idea of imposter syndrome, and how prevalent that is in creative people. It's prevalent across other fields as well, but I think there's an emotional kind of closeness that creatives have with their work, which really can make this imposter syndrome thing really very, it's a huge obstacle. And I would say about 85 to 90% of the people I've interviewed have said it's a common, almost daily, thing that they deal with. And I find it, it's something that's affected me throughout my career as well. And I find it really interesting. And how do you deal with it, and what it means and what it is, that's been across, across the board. The other thing, which I think is really extraordinary and wonderful in a lot of the interviews I've done, is how important health is for creative people. And, you have there's sort of this stereotype of, the creative person who's just like living this crazy life and, or starving, or just like nothing's in balance. But what a lot of the creative professionals I've spoken to and, have talked about the ritual of exercise and kind of looking after themselves and, stepping back from their work and finding other things to actually occupy their time and making sure they keep, things in balance as much as they can. Because obviously if you're working at a high level, if there's a lot of pressure, how do you keep creative? How do you keep the thing going if you're kind of falling apart physically or, mental health wise? So that to me, it's been really a wonderful kind of recognition and the pattern of how important that is. And I've loved hearing, just the daily things that people do to keep themselves grounded.
Okay. What do you do in this, the same terms, what do you do after work, for example, to keep that balance? Personally,
I love nature. And we live in a beautiful part of the world here in just north of New York City. It's gorgeous. It's raining today, but it's beautiful. So I like to get out in nature. I love gardening. So anything where I can actually, use my hands and just let my mind drift, or walking. To me, simple stuff. It's important just to find those moments where you can daydream, and that's another thing that I talk about in the book, and a lot of the creatives I've interviewed talk about, and I kind of call it skilled daydreaming. So actually making sure you carve out that time where you don't have an obligation, but you're sort of doing something that might be, a bit of a ritual or something with your hands, so your mind can drift. And that I find, and we talked about this, that it's different for each person, but it's really about capturing those moments where you let your mind just be expansive, and it doesn't always happen in front of a computer. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I think
definitely agree. Especially if you're all day in front of a computer and doing something else.
Yeah, and I think we've gotten very used to that, and I think there's almost an expectation that you need to do that, and I don't agree with that. I think, and maybe that's coming from my old school background of using pencil and paper. Step away. I think that's a really interesting thing to do. Just maybe go one day without the computer. See what you can generate in that day. I think there's some value in just changing it up and not being on a device the whole time.
Yeah. For sure. And for me, I still am in the computer a lot. Even in my relaxed time, I will say I will spend a lot of time, but I definitely try not to. And because we have also so many distractions happening that, as you said, you need to leave your mind to relax a little bit and to think of nothing, basically. And you cannot do that if you're in front of a screen or on your phone. You always have a notification or something happening that's gonna trigger something.
Yeah, and I think just owning that and being sort of disciplined. And I spoke to interviewed a creative director the other day, and he said he actually schedules on his calendar, do nothing time. And he's had some pushback from people in the company. So I need time where I'm not in meetings and I'm not distracted by, talk or what have you, and in order to actually think creatively. And, there's not a formula, so I think that's the thing you need to feel confident about. It's like, I need to find my way to be creative, and it doesn't always fit into someone else's way.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I get the same, because as I said, I like to have my phone in silent, have notifications turned off, and most times friends, they're gonna call me or send me a message and I'm not going to respond for the next 5 hours. And it's very annoying to them, and I understand that, but it is something I need to do. Do you get anything similar when you're trying to do the same, for example, a similar thing?
Yeah, and I'm as guilty as anyone of going down a digital rabbit hole. In fact, I put a post up the other day about it, because I think these algorithms are designed to keep you in the digital rabbit hole. Yeah. And, you can come to the other end of like an hour of being in that rabbit hole. It's like, what did I actually get from that? It's like, did they just take everything from me and I'm left with nothing? So I think I try and make, I have time blocked out on my calendar as well to just ruminate, to sort of sketch things out, to write things down with a pen. And it's extraordinary how different that feels from typing or, on the phone. And I do feel there's a sort of a stronger connection to a creative, flow. It's sort of getting in your own individual flow. And I like to try and do that and just, ruminate for a little while. Make it, just like really nut things around in my head, instead of looking at something on the screen. And yes, there's times to look at things on the screen and, explore and so on. But I think you need to give yourself that opportunity to think of it first and feel confident that you have, unique thoughts about things, and this idea that everything's been done or what have you. I just don't believe it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I want to ask you again, because so when you're gathering, for example, you're doing your stuff, after doing that, do you feel more creative?
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, I put a post about this the other day. I actually sometimes think about things before I fall asleep. And I will literally wake up in the morning and have had some of the thoughts like figured out. And I just, your unconscious is a very powerful thing. So, if I'm in the garden, weeding or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
I let my mind drift, and I might have a couple of thoughts in my head like about a certain project, or it could be something as simple as like what color background or what texture in a photograph or something along those lines, and things will just drop into my mind and I start to sort of form a picture, and it's just very loose. It's very kind of a natural thing that happens, and I don't always come up with the perfect answer, but I've got something at the end of it. And that's, I think that's better than I was before,
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, I definitely understand that. Yeah. Because I also do the same thing. For me, it's like meditation. I call it this way, but I love the terminology that you use, like daydreaming. No, how do you call it?
Skilled daydreaming.
Skilled daydreaming. That's
Yeah.
perfect. Nice.
Yeah. So you're sort of doing it. There's like, you actually are doing it. Like you're thinking about, I'm going to go and just ruminate on this. And look, it can happen at different times. A lot of people say they're in the shower, they're going for a run, and they figure something out. But for me, it's almost like setting time aside to actually let that thing happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And I also want to go back to the imposter syndrome that you talked about, and ask you, you said that you faced that before. Any personal strategies that you use to overcome it?
Yeah, I've definitely faced it before. And I think it really depends on your broader support system. And, I talk about this in the book and we mentioned this before, about having your community. So, because these thoughts come all the time. And so if you're having thoughts that you think, well, I'm not a very good designer, or I don't think I could go for that job, or whatever it is, that's sort of the negative self-talk, it's like, okay, can you articulate it? Can you bounce it off someone who's close and trusted and kind of get some reassurance? Or can you talk it down yourself? So even for me with writing this book, when I first started writing it, it's like I had the voice. I thought, oh my God, this is hilarious. It's like, oh, here it is. That's just arrived. It's like, oh, you're not a writer. How can you write a book? And it was literally like I was in the the playground having an argument. And I did talk it down because, that to me is like, I could listen to this and then just never do anything. Or I could ignore it and say, you're wrong. Mm-hmm. I'm going to do this. And even if I fail, I will have tried. And, it's literally like talking down the bully. It's a bit of a bully voice. And I don't like bullies. So I'm not going to tolerate that. And so perhaps that for me, that's how I do it. I just like talk down the bully or talk to, my husband, my close colleagues, and, other creative people. So they can sort of say, oh yeah, just ignore that. You know what you're doing, just get some positive reinforcement. And that's another thing, just be around people and keep your posse, really positive, because the people that you surround yourself with very much feed into your own, state of mind.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So even for people that basically have not trained like you to be able to talk back to the bully that they have inside of them, they could speak to other people, and this would be helpful.
Yeah, or sort of write it down, like just kind of get it out of your head. And it's like, oh, this the voice said this. I'm just put that on a piece of paper, screw it up and or put it in the bonfire, have a little ritual yourself to, literally say, oh, this is what it said, done. It's kind of like putting a name on it and then shutting it away, because it's going to keep coming, and you need to have your tools,
Okay. Yeah, that's very interesting. So I have a section in the podcast where I ask 3 random fast questions.
Okay.
Let me find them. And basically it's 3 random questions. You need to answer as like the first thing that pops in your mind, and then you can obviously explain more about it. But yeah, whatever pops in your mind first. So first question is, which is your favorite book?
Oh, Circe.
Can you explain which?
The author's name is not coming to me right now, but it's essentially it's a sort of a modern day, not a modern day version. It's the mythological story around Circe, and it is she's a very powerful woman. It's extraordinarily beautiful. The metaphor in it is poetic. And then I listened to it in audiobook, and I was absolutely swept away. Beautiful.
Since you said that, do you prefer listening to books, having the audiobook, or reading?
I do now, because I get to the point in the day where it's like, oh, I could pick up a book now. It's like I pick up a book and I fall asleep. So I find to actually get a book all the way through a book, I do the audio. So when I'm gardening, when I'm, washing dishes, whatever, like going to the supermarket, I can be listening to it all the time. So I just tend to get through more books that way.
Okay. Yeah, for me, I think, so I tried it last year because I was traveling, and I always like to have like the real book. I find it very difficult for me to read on a screen, on mobile or whatever. So I prefer to have the actual book. So since I was traveling, I couldn't have the book with me. So I tried the audiobook, and I found it super helpful to have it on audio. And now what I do is combine them. So I have the audiobook and the actual book, and I read when I listen to it. And because English is not my native language, it's way easier for me to keep track of what I'm reading.
That's smart. It's a good way of doing it too.
So second question is actually one of your questions. So I have some of the questions that you asked me during the interview that were super interesting. And it's, what's the greatest advice you could give to someone starting in creative industry?
I would say be fearless. You have abilities. Just because you're young and new to the industry, your voice is as important as someone who might have been there for a long time. So you have to put yourself out there. Yeah.
I think that's the first step is always the most scary one to do as a creative.
Yeah, it is. And I think we have to sort of force ourselves, if that's not our comfort zone, and like, whose comfort zone is it really? It's very few people. It's like, oh yeah, I'm great at speaking in public, whatever. It doesn't necessarily come naturally to most people. And so I think you have to see it as a part of your role as a creative person to advocate for yourself, to advocate for the project, and make sure you don't get sort of pushed to the background. So it does take a little, internal strength to get there, but I think it's really important to just speak, to kind of be present and be in the meetings and use your voice.
Yeah, definitely. And as an introvert, I can definitely understand that.
Yeah.
And third question is, what is a random thing you are not very good at?
Math.
Math. Yeah, I can agree. I can relate. So I'm going to go back to the book, Creative Career Blueprint. I think the first question I need to ask you, because I think I didn't ask you that, is how did you start it? What inspired you to write the book?
Oh, I think it was a lot of things, but I think I got to a certain age and felt like I had something to say, particularly as a woman, as a female creative, having gone through a whole lot of different parts of my career, and also working with people who have been in the pandemic, had, sometimes, younger creatives who may have never stepped foot into an actual office. So they're working virtually from the get-go. They've left college and have gone into their own home, and they've never had a lot of that learning that you get from being in a creative, business or an off studio or what have you. And I just was feeling like I was giving a lot of kind of positive reinforcement, and I felt like there was a lot, people were wanting more and more of that. And it just struck me, it was sort of an alignment of things that I could have used at different points in my career, and recognizing those moments looking back, but also seeing, in current times how, there's an expectation that everyone's just going to go along in their careers and like succeed. And there's never a given that that's going to happen. And I think it's this notion of supporting and helping people. So it was really a confluence of different things. And I also just wanted to pull all my creative sources and gather other people and hear from them about how they've managed their own, what I feel it can be a very, nebulous career. It's not like you're becoming an accountant, where you can sort of see your entire life in front of you. For a lot of people, a creative career is very challenging. It's kind of this, it can be spiraling. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to write the book. And I didn't find any other books that I felt really spoke to this. Like, there's a lot of creative books out there, obviously, but for me, I wanted something that really, on a very practical level, helped you understand how you can maneuver in your own career. And just in terms of the name of it, I'm not making the creative career blueprint for you or the reader. The reader is making it themselves. So I'm just, finding ways to help frame certain challenges and, certain times of the career, whether you're just entering or, how do you get support? How do you find mentors? Different things that are sort of practical things. And it's up to the creative to figure out what those are for them. So it's really not me directing and saying, oh, this is what you should do. It's here's some experiences of other creative people, and so people can relate to where they are in their own place and find what works for them.
Okay, that's very interesting, because I thought the same thing actually. Since you explained that, that's very helpful, that you're gonna have like the blueprint planned out already, but it's not that, it's the reader that creates that blueprint.
Yeah. Okay. And I one of my sort of things is, you're the creative director of your own career. So you've got to direct your own career, because creative careers can be very nebulous, amorphous, go off in different directions, but you're the one who needs to guide that ship. Otherwise it feels like other external forces are kind of, shuffling you along. And I think that's where you can end up perhaps in a company you're not satisfied with, or just, a little confused about where you are in your career. And I've been in those situations. So looking back, I can see that now. It's like, oh, if I'd sort of taken a little bit more of a robust view of where I was, I might have gotten out of there sooner, or, changed direction. And I think that's what it is. It's an awareness of where you are, and kind of taking ownership of that.
I see. Is there a specific, since you mentioned that, any specific thing in your career that you would love to pivot a different way?
Yeah. Look, there's probably a few. Having moved to New York City, and, wanting to get my foot in the door, I was very quick to jump into certain roles that may not have necessarily been good for me, or working in environments that, that I just wasn't learning enough, and I was starting to feel a bit stagnant. And I didn't move quickly enough. Like I didn't adjust, oh, I'm not, where I should be. I need to kind of make a change. And some of that was just merely to do with confidence. And that's another thing that I talk about in the book, because I think that's really important in a creative career. Well, it's important in any career, obviously, but particularly for younger creatives. Find the things that you can start to build a foundation for your confidence. And for me, my belief with that is it's the doing of the work. It's the doing, it's working through the hard stuff. It's the kind of being diligent, showing up for yourself. And it's nice to get accolades. It's nice to get recognition, but I feel like those moments are temporary. I feel like in terms of building confidence in your career, it's really about kind of getting your teeth into it and, just keep producing, keep going and keep working, keep exploring, keep learning. And for me, that's what gives the confidence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think confidence it's so important and so rare at the same time in the start of any career. So yeah, definitely, it's good that you are mentioning that. And I guess the book will be around that.
Yeah, I think I don't know. For me, when I think about myself as a young designer, I thought that if I got certain, awards, or I got a certain role, or got chosen for a project, that would be the thing that gave me the confidence. But what I realized, it was actually just doing the work and, kind of learning on the job. It's like, yeah, I can do that. I know how to do that because I keep doing it. And that's where you start to feel stronger, which it's really helped.
Definitely agree. Yeah. The more you put the reps in, the more feel confident of doing it. Yeah, makes sense. The hard part is to actually do the reps.
Yes, exactly. Well, yeah, just know that it's really about place. It's really literally, and this is why part of the reason I called it the blueprint, because it does feel like building a house to me. You're building a foundation, and that can only come when you put all the pieces in place.
Okay. Well, that's very interesting to me because I also had an idea of a book during the summer, I think, which was like in a not similar, but I'm actually talking to the same people, like people starting their careers, because I had the same idea of people are not sure what to do at that point of their life. I'm not interviewing different people, but I'm trying to gather a lot of information from all around the world. But yeah, that's very interesting. And I started writing this book. Again, I'm not a writer. I'm very bad at writing. So again, the imposter syndrome that you talked about. But that's very inspiring for me to continue doing that, what you are doing.
Right. And I think even with writing a book where that you don't feel like that's your natural place of comfort, you can lean on people that know more, lean on people that are experts in that area. And like, that's why I'm working with an editor to help with the structure and help to, look over, the chapter outline and so on. So I'm saying, well, I'm not expert at everything. I'm going to help get these people in to help me. And it's okay. Just, I think that's the other thing. It's like, you don't have to be an expert in everything. You just have to pursue your creativity authentically and be honest to that.
That's awesome, because I think this is what great leaders do. What you mentioned, be able to admit that I'm not good at this and be able to bring someone to help you with that instead of think that you're the best at everything.
Well, yeah, and I think there is this assumption too in teams, and I've seen this like in my own, careers, like that every creative is going to know everything or they know all the apps and all the software, and they can shoot and they can do it. It's just insane. And I think I got to a certain point in my career, it's like, wow, they really want you to do everything. And it's like, I don't think that's me. I think I need to specialize in the areas that I, trust in my own self and learn. But this notion that we have to be, everything like you've been hired and you actually know every piece of software inside out. It's like, that's nonsense. Such nonsense.
Yeah, definitely. You also mentioned being, like a few questions back, being a woman going through this in this industry so many years. So did that play a role? Did it was more difficult for you, especially back in the day, I guess?
Back in the day, absolutely. Coming in through advertising in, big agencies in Australia, there's a perception of, how you look and how you act. And, there's a sort of an underlying, pattern in some of these fields. I think it has changed. I think women's voices have become clearer. They've become more confident. But, there's still a ways to go, in terms of female representation at the top of, large firms and, diversity in all areas, representation. So, yes, I think, to kind of quote a sort of a 60s thing, it's like the fight's not over, but we have to keep elevating and protecting and making sure there's spaces for females, for, everyone who's felt their voice hasn't been heard, make sure those spaces are there. And that can be confronting. It can be confronting, on a lot of levels. But, I'm just not shy anymore about saying it. And I've got 3 sisters, there's a strong kind of feminist aspect to my background.
Nice. Do you have many women in the book as interviewed?
Yes, absolutely. And want to make sure that, their voices and their journeys are represented. There are some very successful women that I've spoken to, and I find it fascinating to hear how they got there and what they had to, may have had to go through to get to the top of their game. Because there weren't always the support systems in place. But as one of the designers said, you're always, you're standing on the shoulders of other people who've gone before you. And, respect to all the women who have fought for places on, boards, on, in the top of a company, and what, they went through. I just have extraordinary respect for those women.
Yeah, definitely. Me too. Like I have seen it. Obviously, I'm a man, so I didn't feel it the same way, but I have seen it. For example, I remember a story. It was the first day of I have passed to the graphic design school. So it was the first day. It was I don't remember how they call it, but it's a welcome thing that you go there and someone will going to talk to you. So I thought I'm going to go there and it's going to be like a very inspirational talk and everyone's going to leave inspired. Instead, it was a very old school professor with very old ideas, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
And basically, instead of inspiring us, he was like, you should quit now because it's very expensive to be in graphic design school, etc., etc. And at the end, he said, so you are 100 people in here and only 5 of you are gonna end with a degree, and those 5 are gonna be men. None of them is gonna be women.
Wow.
And basically 80 out of 100 was women that passed in the group. There were only 20 men. So that was very weird for me to hear. And I remember I was very pissed off, and I remember it to this day.
Yeah. Look, I could tell you some horror stories. But I think we just know the history, and we have to just keep reiterating that let's make sure it's an even playing field. Let's make sure women's voices are there, and diversity always, and not in a token manner. It has to be authentic. It has to be, on every level of a company. And we're certainly not there yet. In certain design fields, in certain creative fields, it's very male dominated. I have friends in photography, I have friends in film, very male dominated, and it influences the stories that are told. It influences how they get made. It filters down. So that's why it's not just oh gosh, women, anything like that. It really changes the human story, the human story is everyone, So that's where we need to be very aware and not stop talking about it.
So writing the book, you collaborated basically with so many creatives. Did that influence the book? Did that change what you initially had in mind? And anything that shaped it differently?
Absolutely. I think as I started to do the interview process, and I've interviewed dozens now of creatives, certain themes were sort of rising to the top. It's like, I need to kind of look at this more. And what we talked about earlier about, the similarities with some of the creatives, like, wow, I could really pull that out and kind of make more of a story there. So yeah, it has kind of molded the journey, which is good, because I want it to be really based in true stories and true experiences. So, it's been a fascinating ride. So I don't want it to end, quite frankly. And maybe, there's more than one book in this whole journey, but and I've got a feeling my editor's going to say that soon. It's like, you got to stop with the research, I think honestly you could keep going, and maybe that just becomes more of an organic conversation, in social or podcast or whatever. But because it isn't a sort of, oh, it's done, it's finished. It's a continuing story of the creative fields, and that's the story that I love.
After the book is out, what's the impact you're hoping for, especially for the people that are going to read it?
Well, I'm really aiming the book at people that are coming into the industry. So they may have done college, they may have done a diploma, and what I really want to do is help those people move, get into the field and start to feel confident from the get-go, or at least have some structures, some plans, some tools that they can use. And I would love to, hear more from them, connect more deeply with that group. So I really want it to be a resource for grads and, younger creatives, and, have an organic conversation ongoing, and, speak to people, like do workshops, all of this stuff. I think it's fascinating. And I've got a lot of energy. I have a lot of love for creative people. And I think I have a lot to give to help people wherever I can.
Yeah, that will be super interesting. Yeah, because I think this way people can also find, like, they read the book and then they can find you or find the community behind this book. That actually the book has created this community where they can find other creatives.
Yeah, I mean, that would be my ideal, that it does create a community, and and that you can sort of drop into it in where you want, and whether I'm talking about how to communicate in a meeting, how to communicate in a workshop, or a brainstorming session when you're a junior designer. So there's lots of different sort of pockets that I think could be helpful, and I think I can sort of dig down further into. I'm doing a workshop next week with some AP, fashion design students around how to brainstorm, and how to find their voice in a brainstorm, and come at it confidently. And so there's the sorts of things that I think could help. And as well as just managing, imposter syndrome, the dreaded thing. I think there's a lot to think about in a creative career, and hopefully I can help them.
And I'm thinking about that you talked to so many people, so many creatives, and I guess you gather so many amazing information right now. Can you recall what was the best interviews you had, or the best creatives that you have interviewed?
Oh gosh, so many. I don't want to pick favorites because I love them all. But
yeah, I guess, yeah.
I mean, just in terms of like fascinating stories, Mirko Ilic, who is a graphic designer, poster designer, illustrator, who has been around as a designer since the 60s, and shared a studio space with Milton Glaser in New York City. Fascinating interview, fascinating person. He's an activist. He does this extraordinary international project called the Tolerance Project, where he gets groups of illustrators to create posters around the concept of tolerance. And this has gone all over the world. So if you look it up, the Tolerance Project, it's extraordinary. And his take on being a creative person, on what it means to be an activist and a citizen as a creative person, that I felt very inspired by. Because one of these quotes in the interview was like, "You're a citizen first. You're a citizen first. Before you're a designer, you have to be a citizen first. And what are you going to do? What are you going to give back?" And I thought that was a really compelling, quote. So he was amazing. An old friend, great, creative, Eva Orner, who's a documentarian and made some amazing films. Her story about being a female in film is really compelling. She's an Oscar winner and goes into like very dangerous, areas to shoot films. She's shot in war zones. She's done extraordinary stuff. And just hearing her story and how she's navigated, and the importance of health for her, and the importance of balance, and that to me was great information. And then some really just lots of cool anecdotes. A great illustrator that I've worked with, Ryan McAmis, and the way he got into illustration, he was a graphic designer straight out in studios, and he basically did a freebie job. A friend had called him, said, "Oh, would you be able to do some illustrations? They may be used for Fashion Week in New York City." And he did a bunch of illustrations, and they got huge press. And he has this very cool portraiture style. If you look him up, it's just great, almost like a 3D style. And I just loved hearing his story of how he became an illustrator. And he just, he tried something and he kind of went for it, and it opened doors. And any stories where I hear of like how you got from A to B and you didn't feel you were ready or whatever, I've really found fascinating. So there's a lot of them. I mean, I could keep going.
I'm sure. Yeah, you must have so many of them. But
yeah, it is cool. It's very interesting.
I noticed in the first ones that you had like a pattern of people that are creative, but also have like a deeper, not meaning, but they have a deeper cause. They're trying to do something way bigger than themselves.
Yeah.
So
I mean, one of the filmmakers, again, old friend Garth Davis, he's the director of the film Lion, and made several other films. He talks about the importance of kindness, and people on his set and in his teams being good people, and I just loved hearing that, because of course you think, yeah, of course, we all want to have good people around us, but to be at the top level and say, this is a real priority. And, that to me that's just a hallmark of, great creative, great human being. It's just, I love that story.
So anything else in the horizon after the book, maybe? Anything that you have planned or you're thinking of creatively, maybe?
Well, I think, I'd love to do more workshops, more, talking engagements, but I think I've got another book in me. And it was funny when I started and I said to my husband, it's like, I'm already thinking about the second book is like, who knew I would be a writer all of a sudden? But yeah, so I think there's potentially another book. And yeah, as we talked about before, just sort of growing this community and elevating the conversation around the importance of creative in all fields, frankly, and making sure creative people are being their best advocates and growing in whatever way they can.
That's amazing. So we are almost in the end. Where people can find you, where they can connect with you online?
Sure. So I have my Instagram handle, Creative Career Book. That's my Instagram handle. You could go there, and I'd love to DM with anyone of your subscribers. I love chatting with creatives in general. And, there's a lot of people have also just sort of filled in some written questionnaire stuff if people are interested in doing that to contribute to the book. I have a questionnaire, and I would love to hear people's stories, because this is really gathering, I'm trying to gather as much from across the world, across the board, and have an authentic resource for creatives.
Okay, I will have all the links obviously in the description. So we'll have also the link for the questionnaire. Is this the best place to go if they want to follow the book? Like, if they are interested in this and they're waiting for the book, where's the best place to go?
Yeah, I think it would be on Insta, and I have a website as well, but I'm sort of posting kind of more updated posts and things as I'm moving along through the process on Insta. So that would be the one place. It's probably the easiest.
Amazing. Any final thoughts? Any final tips you would like to give to young creatives?
Oh, I mean, I think trust your instincts. You have a voice. Make your journey a positive one. Own your creative journey, and you are the creative director of your own career. So a lot of people don't always get the support from family. They might be coming from a family that doesn't really understand what it means to be a creative professional, but there's a very valid space for you, and that's absolutely your place, so that's probably just in a nutshell. It's okay. You're going to be okay. There is a community for you.
Beautiful. I think that's a perfect way to end the podcast. And thank you for being in the show. You could come back whenever you want. Maybe when the book is ready, you can come back. And yeah, thank you. It was an honor to have you.
I'd love that. Thank you, Chris. This has been so much fun.